Before I start to speak, I'd like to pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I'd like to speak a little bit today about a theme that came up for me this morning. I went on an arms round with one of my sisters here at Dhamma, and we were speaking about how to work with reactivity. And it's a very interesting and fruitful conversation as we were standing with our alms bowls out in the local shopping plaza. And we were relating around events that have happened for us where we had the experience of noticing reactivity within and also reactivity in others. And so this feels like such a universal experience and important area for us to understand, important area to investigate, important area to know how to work skillfully with. How to work skillfully with reactivity. Reactivity, that which is kind of triggered when something happens, something comes in through the sense doors, how we can sometimes have a response that is quite intense, quite a sort of energy surge, or there's momentum behind our response, and there may be some affect, some feeling of irritability or anger or fear or desire and so forth. And we can feel, can't we, if we're triggered, if we have some kind of reactivity to what's happening, what we perceive around us, we can be very aware of that, especially if we practice meditation. We can have this kind of body awareness that's developing over time, and we can really appreciate when there's tension arising or heat, some kind of reaction. And also in others, we can perceive when there's an overwhelm and reactivity manifests in speech or behavior. And we can notice sometimes, we might ourselves say or do something that creates a reaction in another person, or we might observe other people reacting to one another. Some kind of hook, some kind of response to that which is seen, heard, smelt, tasted, touched, or thought. So I'd like to begin, I think, by sharing a sutta, which I also just read this morning, that relates to this theme. I really love how whatever's happening for me in my day, in my practice, in my life, every time I pick up the teachings of the Buddha, there's relevance. There's something immediately significant and helpful in these teachings. This to me is quite remarkable. And there's always, it doesn't matter really. I work my way through the Pali Canon again and again. And so I'm not choosing often, what suttas to read. It's just the next one along. And this is really, for me, a very good exercise because it gives the opportunity to see the relevance, always relevant, these teachings to any and every situation. So how beautiful is that? So I read this sutta this morning, and I'd like to read it to you now to begin this conversation about working with these human hearts that are so sensitive, and until they're free from all defilements, are prone to reactivity, to heat, to kind of, rather than allowing the flow of dhammas, to actually hooking onto some aspect of the world around us and making making a bit of trouble with it, having a bit of an argument with it. So this sutta is in Samyutta Nikaya, and it's number 35, chapter 35, and it's sutta number 94, and it's called Adantaagutta Sutta. Adanta means, Danta is tamed. So Adanta, untamed. Agutta, gutta is guarded, protected. Agutta, unguarded. So the name of this sutta is the untamed, the unguarded teaching. So the Buddha at Savatthi, speaking to the monks, he speaks about the 6 senses, the 6 fields of contact: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. And he says, when these 6 fields of contact are not tamed, they're not guarded, they're not protected, they're not restrained, then they bring suffering, they bring dukkha. And he explains what the 6 senses are, these 6 fields of contact. And then he goes on to say, when these 6 senses, these 6 ways in which we take in the world, when they are guarded, tamed, protected, and restrained, then happiness arises. So this is yet another concise teaching from the Buddha that really covers all the bases for us. If we practice restraint, we can relax, we can feel safe. There is happiness in that. And when we are reactive, when we're not able to kind of meet what comes in through the 6 senses with equanimity, then we suffer. And so what is the guarding, the protecting, the taming, and the restraining of these 6 senses? Does it mean we want to close our eyes, shut our ears, put plugs in, stop eating and drinking, clamp down on our thinking, turn away from that, keep away from everybody? No, I don't think it means that. What it really means is that we can have a quality of mindfulness whereby we notice that the world comes to us through these six senses, and we can be very watchful. We can be very attentive to the process or processes of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. We can be kind of on the ball. We can be alert to what's happening. And when we have this quality of mindfulness, we are restrained, because we're not going to allow any kind of aspect of getting caught up in the experiences that we're having. If we're mindful, if we're aware, if we're present, then we are in the present. And the present is, of course, constantly changing. And these inputs through the sense doors are constantly changing. And we can kind of keep up with that, can't we? Instead of getting caught up in the past, in something that happens, holding on to it and making much of it, we can flow with reality. And that aspect of letting go, non-stickiness, allowing things to move naturally through. In this sutta, the Buddha goes on to give some beautiful verses, and I'd like to read the translation of these verses to you. The Holy One, the teacher, went on to say, "Friends, it's just the six fields of contact that lead the unrestrained to suffering. Those who understand how to restrain them, how to restrain the six senses, they live with faith as partner, uncorrupted. When you've seen pleasant sights, and unpleasant ones too, get rid of all manner of desire for the pleasant, without hating what you don't like. When you've heard sounds, both liked and disliked, don't fall under the thrall of sounds you like. Get rid of hate for the unliked. And don't hurt your mind by thinking of what you don't like. When you've smelled a pleasant, fragrant scent, and one that's foul and unpleasant, get rid of repulsion for the unpleasant, while not yielding to desire for the pleasant. When you've enjoyed a sweet, delicate taste, and sometimes those that are bitter, don't be attached to enjoying sweet tastes, and don't despise the bitter. Don't be intoxicated by a pleasant touch, and don't tremble at a painful touch. Look with equanimity at the duality of pleasant and painful contacts, without favouring or opposing anything at all. People generally let their perceptions proliferate, perceiving and proliferating. They're attracted. When you've expelled all thoughts of worldly life, wonder, intent on renunciation. When the mind is well developed like this, regarding the six senses, it doesn't waver at contact at all. Friends, those who have mastered greed and hate go beyond birth and death. Ewan. So this beautiful verses from the Buddha, and such an encouragement for us to let go let go of reactivity, to be aware of the natural reality of pleasant and unpleasant feelings that arise, in relation to what we take in of the world. It's happening all the time, but we can be restrained, we can be wise, we can be on the ball, alert, attentive to what's happening, and not let things go any further. Not to let the pleasant and the enjoyment of pleasant feelings grow into something called desire. Not to let the unpleasant feelings that can arise when we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think something ugly, something repulsive, something negative, something unwholesome. Not to let the unpleasant feelings that arise become anything more than that. Not to develop aversion. And so we can keep this kind of reactivity, this tendency towards reactivity in check, and develop equanimity. And it's quite interesting to consider how we work with reactivity when it arises, because it's very good to recognize that we don't want to be reacting positively or negatively. We don't want to be hooked by anything. We don't want to be caught up in the past. We want to be able to be present with what's happening now. And in order to do that, it does require this quality of non-stickiness, of letting go. And, we know how to practice, we know what's good and what's unfortunate. Reactivity is something, yes, to be avoided, but what happens when it arises? What happens when we get hooked? What happens when we're caught up in some past event that's led to a strong reaction, some kind of sticking, some kind of trauma, some kind of blockage, where the mind wants to keep returning, going back to what's happened and proliferates around it? What to do then? And this happens for all of us until we're free from all desire and aversion. We're going to notice that there are times when we get caught by Mara, hooked in, trapped in the net, flailing around, trying to find the way out. And it's just like an animal, a creature that's caught in a net, isn't it? The more we struggle, the more we react to the reactivity, then the more tightly bound we become. So how to find calm, how to find peace, how to find equanimity in the midst of the storm. And of course, for each of us, in our own experience, when the reactivity is here, our responsibility is to give it attention, give it our full attention, let it be important, let it be significant, respect the fact that we've been caught, that we're trapped, that we're struggling, and that we're suffering. And there can be, can't there, the inclination to kind of just want to turn away and distract with something else, which is simply heaping more suffering on the suffering that's already happening. So as the Buddha pointed out in the First Noble Truth, there is suffering. Where there is suffering, let's be attentive to that. Let's give that our full attention. And so the quality of mindfulness brought to bear on reactivity gives the beginnings of relief, gives us a chance to feel doesn't it? The suffering in anger or fear or desire, whatever it may be. Something's trapped us. We're in the past. We're longing for or trying to get away from something. We're making trouble. We're arguing with reality. When we can bring our mindfulness to bear on the suffering of that, this kind of flailing around, kind of reeling about, when we can begin to notice what's happening, it's the beginning of relief. So we can begin to disentangle. And it's not that we disentangle, is it? We're not actually figuring it out. It's the quality of attention. It's the mindfulness itself that enables this kind of combing through what's happening, this kind of straightening out, this disentangling, untying the knots. We can literally, can't we, sit back and observe it happening when we bring attention to bear on that which is suffering, that which is struggling. And I think, for me, there's a sense of, there's a great maturity required and a kind of dispassion required, because we really don't want to give any slack. We don't want to give any quarter to reactivity. We want to jump on it. We want to be willing to stop it in its tracks, so that we don't make the mistake of speaking or acting out of this kind of energy, impulsive, reactive, hot energy. We don't want to create any more suffering in this world, do we? We want to see the end of suffering right here. And so when there's reactivity here, we want to be very kind of ruthless with that. It's like, here's Mara. Mara has arisen, and I don't want to allow any kind of movement away from what's true and real to be able to manifest in this heart and mind. I want to stop it. I want to jump on it. I want to see it. I want to gaze at it until it has run its course. And when we're in this way quite strict with this mind, with this heart, we can see reactivity arising, and we can bring all our attention to bear in such a way that we are restraining, practicing this taming, this protecting of energy, this guarding of the mind and heart. And, it's in some ways in this teaching, in this sutta that I've just read, one can feel that there's an encouragement to guard the senses in terms of just not taking in too much. And there's a certain value in this, like not to take into this heart and mind the contents of other hearts and minds, not to overwhelm or bombard this heart and mind with too much worldly suffering, but to work with what's here already is enough, So there is a definite, I would say, encouragement from the Buddha for us to try not to live externally, but bring the attention here and read this book, take in the news that's here, what's going on in this world. It's enough. There's plenty there for us to work with. And this is the most skillful use of our time. There's also an encouragement, I would say, to not only restrain and be mindful of the amount of input that we're receiving from the world and to guard the sense doors, but also whatever has been received, we want to guard the mind, the heart and the mind that's receiving these inputs, to really notice what's the impact of this sight, this sound, this thought, to be very present for that. And so in this way, yes, we can notice reactivity as it arises, and we can nip it in the bud. We can jump on it. We can attend to it kindly. Mindfulness is so kind, isn't it? Mindfulness, awareness is so generous, kind, loving. It's so good. Just the willingness to pay attention is the greatest kindness that we can do for this heart and mind. So the quality of mindfulness is what enables the taming, the guarding, the protecting, and the restraining of the senses, of the reactivity, and enables us to be at peace with the world, have a quality of equanimity that grows with practice, where we're able to stay cool, calm and collected here. What a gift. What a gift to this one. What a gift to the world. When it comes to noticing, perceiving reactivity in the world around us, people reacting to one another, or people reacting to us, to something that's been said, something that's been done, and we see the triggering and the response from others, some effect, some painful consequences arising. How to work with that? And I can see that there's a difference, because when there's reactivity here, it's my responsibility, it's our responsibility to attend to that, to take responsibility for that. Whatever happens around us, isn't it? If there's reactivity here, this is my work. There's no one to blame. There's no point projecting onto others blame and fault. That's a childish thing. The mature thing to do is to take responsibility for whatever arises here, for whatever reason. The reasons are not as important as what's actually happening, are they? When we can fully attend to what's happening, we no longer are at risk of blaming and judging others, right? We're just busy. We're too busy clearing out the dross that's here. You know, the reactivity that always comes from some greed, hatred, or delusion here. If there's no greed, hatred, or delusion here, there's no reactivity. So we can take responsibility for our reactions, and we can, in that way, we can clear out the old karma, the bad habits, the blind spots can be revealed to us. So no judging, no blaming, taking responsibility when the reactivity is here. But when there's reactivity around us, in others, how do we deal with that? Do we deal with it in the same way? By jumping on it and making much of it and really attending to it? It doesn't seem quite that would quite work to me. If somebody's reactive and I'm immediately addressing that with them, it usually would lead to quite an unfortunate result. If someone's angry or upset and I want to come and straighten them out, it generally leads to more anger, more upset, more suffering. So it's quite interesting to notice that, when there's reactivity in the world around us, the response that's required is something different. And maybe it's not so different, but there is a quality of kind of stepping back that may be required. It's not so different in the sense that kindness, calmness, attention are helpful, whether it's reactivity here or reactivity in another. But there's a different quality, I feel, to how to deal with reactivity in another. And that is somehow to be giving space, being respectful of the other's need for their attention to be directed towards their suffering. And how important it is for us not to jump on the bandwagon with them. How important it is for us to be dispassionate, to be able to let go of any kind of adding of fuel to the fire. So if there's reactivity around us and we're in any way inclined to get drawn into that, into an argument, into a dispute, into having any kind of take on the situation at all, then it's good for us to let go of that, to stand back, to be quiet, to be kind, isn't it? To be able to observe with great respect and, support for the reactivity that's in the field, and to, in that way, hopefully, enable peace to arise, or peace to re-manifest, reappear as the reactivity has a chance to fade away. So it can be quite tough sometimes. If someone's angry with us, if someone's upset with us, it could be something we've said or done, it could be something completely unrelated, but if there's that energy of reactivity around us, it can be quite challenging, can't it, to not get involved, either for good or for ill. Not to argue, not to dispute, not to add to any kind of heat in a situation, but also even not to try and make it right, not to try and help in a way, because anything we do is liable to possibly be misconstrued, possibly add to the kind of pressure of the intensity of the situation for the other. How to be cool, for us to be able to not get involved, to be able to not turn away either, like to be present but without bringing our reactivity in any way whatsoever. Leave our perceptions alone. Leave our thoughts alone. Be still. Be quiet. Be kind. And it can be really sometimes very challenging and a really good practice. For instance, if someone gets mad, gets angry, and starts to blame us for something we've done, starts to harangue us, to criticize us, how do we keep cool? How do we relate skillfully to that? And one quality that comes to mind for me that's really significant and quite radical in a way is that quality of refraining from defending oneself. Because if we're really kindly, attentively wishing ourselves and the others around us well, then we can recognize that whenever we try to provide any kind of a defense, justification, or to excuse ourselves from the blame, it tends to add more difficulty for the other. If we're being blamed and criticized, the kindest, the noblest, the most peaceful thing that we can offer is to offer our peace, offer our non-reactivity, No need to defend. There's nothing to defend. There's no need to justify. There's nothing to justify. There's just suffering and the end of suffering. And we can choose to suffer if we get involved, or we can choose to end the suffering if we're willing to just keep letting go. So we can have anger coming at us, judgment, blame, criticism, whether there's any truth or justice in it or not, is almost beside the point. The point is there's energy, reactivity, suffering, and we can work with that. Let go of that. Let go of the heat, let go of the reactivity, and be willing to allow the suffering to stop right here. And this is really powerful and radical and even revolutionary. Peacemaking. And it's completely within our reach when we're practicing the Buddha's teachings, because everything in the Buddha's teachings is encouraging us to let go of reactivity, to be restrained, to guard the senses, to guard this heart, not to step into the fray when there's suffering, to be very sharp and alert, whether it's in oneself or it's out in the field. When it's in ourselves, we can be very ruthless, very dispassionate, very quick to work with facing the suffering, being present for it, and allowing it to move through. And when it's in others, either in relation to us or observing conflict, dispute, suffering between others, our work is to keep aware of any reactivity that's here, let it go, and offer our peacefulness, our calm, our kindness, our loving kindness into the field. And so we can be bringers of peace. We can be peacemakers. And we can let go of anything that's not offering this kind of coolness and calmness in the world. Let go of judgment. Let go of blame. Let go of any need to defend or justify. What is there to defend or justify? And so I offer these words for you to reflect upon, and hope they may be helpful in our lives.